everybody, to the Pulse Beat podcast. It takes place many times a week where we introduce to you the most amazing people that are making change and change artists and change agents that are really making a difference in the heart of America and actually globally. And today we have a very special guest with us. Of course, we always have Pastor Bill Cook, the founder of the Black Robe Regiment. Bill, thank you so much for continuing with this. Our country is in so need of everything that you're doing. And you have a very special guest with you as well, Pastor, right? Pastor Dan Fisher.
Yes,
Is
indeed.
that right?
Yeah, you bet.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much for joining us from Oklahoma.
Oh, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Now, Bill, how long have you known Pastor Dan?
Dan, what would you say, about 5 years?
Oh gosh,
7?
Bill, didn't we? Yeah, I think it may be closer to 10. You don't want to admit it, but I think it's been it's been a long time. It was pre-COVID. It was pre-COVID that we met. So, COVID's 2019, 2020. So
we are really excited to have you today, Dan. Dan is a good friend. We've known him now for 10 years, I guess. And we're excited that you're here with us, Dan. And America's Black Robe Regiment. It's America's Black Robe Regiment. We're trying to establish chapters within every political jurisdiction in the country. And that's what we've been working on for the last 14 years. And Dan has been a tremendous encouragement to me in the years that we've known each other, Dan and the people that you've worked with. And so what a privilege to have you today. I first saw Dan stand up one day at a conference give what's called a Bringing Back the Black Robed Regiment presentation, a dramatic presentation, which, to be truthful, was incredible. I'd never seen anything like it. And he was talking about the things that pastors of the founding era did. The men who really made the country were the pastors who garrisoned the pulpits of America. And what we teach in the America's Black Robe Regiment, we tell people unapologetically that as great as the people we think of as the founding fathers were, they weren't the founding fathers. The founders of this nation were the pastors. They are the ones that preached the political worldview that shaped the freest, most prosperous, most beneficent, most powerful, most prolific missionary sending republic in human history. That's what the pastors did. And so, Dan, we're excited to have you today. And one of the things I'd love to have you talk about, if you would, is what you believe are 3 reasons today why pastors won't engage the culture. A lot of pastors are shy about doing that.
Yeah,
and you could tell us a few stories along that line as well.
Oh, so sure. Yeah, well, thank you, Bill. Thank you guys for having me. The pastors of the Revolution period or the 18th century really are the descendants of the pastors who actually founded what we know of as the culture of North America, which became the colonies, beginning really certainly with what we call the Pilgrims, the separatists, who left Holland after they had left England 12 years before that, because they were seeking religious asylum when they went to Holland, but then they left Holland because they didn't like the liberal culture there, and they didn't want their kids and grandkids growing up there. So when they came to America, they finally land outside of what is Plymouth, Massachusetts today, and they write their Mayflower Compact before they disembark. And if you're familiar with the Mayflower Compact, probably most of you are, at the very beginning of it, they say that the reason they came to North America was to further the gospel. So actually, you could call the Pilgrims missionaries. And those guys, see, they connected what they believed biblically, spiritually, with what we would call society or governance or just the culture. So there was no separation kind of thing. So they began to establish themselves, and then you have the great Puritan migration. A lot of people mistake the Pilgrims for Puritans. They weren't. They were separatists. They believed the Church of England was so far gone you couldn't purify it, thus separatists. And then it was the Puritans who believed you could you could clean up the Church of England, but about 20 years after after the Pilgrims got here, they realized you couldn't, so they began to migrate as well. So you go forward to the 1700s, and you've got the pastors who have learned over that some 100 years this whole concept. And of course, it didn't begin with the Pilgrims coming to America. They had this in their hearts way back in Europe, as they were breaking away from the Church of England and divine right of kings and all that kind of stuff. So the pastors of what we would call our War of Independence were just the beneficiaries of all who preceded them, like all of us. We all stand on the shoulders of other giants who've helped pave the way. So here you have these guys. And I think, Bill, one of the great distinguishing characteristics of what I call it the framing generation. I refer to the Pilgrims as the founding generation. The framing generation would be the Madisons, the George Washingtons, the Jeffersons, and the preachers of that period. Now, it doesn't really matter, what terms we use, but just so people will know, when I talk about the framers, that's who I'm talking about. Those guys, one of the distinguishing characteristics, apart from the fact that they believe the Bible was inerrantly the Word of God from cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation. So obviously that was a precursor. They believed the Bible, but they did not believe in this myth or this lie today that we have of separation of church and state. It was just completely foreign to them. In fact, I think if you had asked them, they would have looked at you with a really weird look and said, "What on earth are you talking about?" They probably wouldn't have understood even what that concept is. So over the years, since we've been a republic, Bill, you know this quite well, we've struggled, and we have ups and downs. It's kind of like a wave in the ocean. You have the trough, and then you have the crest, and then you have the trough. And over those years, we've slowly but surely drifted from Scripture and the founding principles. And the leftists, who've been at work since really the beginning, have been trying to create barriers, trying to create roadblocks for preachers. Because if you think about it, the largest group of people that meets on a regular basis in America has always been the church. And if you're just going to talk about organizations, we all know the church is more than an organization. It's an organism. It's the body of Christ. But as far as meeting together, there's no larger group that meets more regularly and more organizationally than the church. So if I'm a communist, if I'm a God hater, if I'm a liberty hater, then I've got to silence the church. See, I've got to silence those preachers. And then, of course, you silence the preachers, Bill, as you know, you preach this all the time. Then you've silenced the congregation, because as goes the leader, so goes the church, so goes the nation. Amen. So three of the great barriers, at least to me, when I speak and teach around the country, I believe there are at least three major barriers that just come up over and over and over. And pastors say, "I can't get involved in politics, and here's why." So here's the three that I've encountered. One, they believe in the lie of separation of church and state. Now, let me clarify. If we're talking about the church taking over the government and it becomes a theocracy, I think every one of us would probably agree that we don't want the church to merge with the government like it does in the Muslim countries. Okay, so if that's what we're talking about with the Holy Roman Empire and Constantine, maybe we might agree. But that's not what they mean by separation of church and state. What they mean is the Bible does not address politics and governance and civic responsibility. That's unspiritual, that's secular, and we're pious and super spiritual. And so we can't mix the sacred with the secular, which really is an ancient form of Greek Gnosticism. The idea that the Gnostics believed that the body was inherently evil, materialism, anything material was evil, you couldn't redeem it, only the soul was redeemable. So actually the Gnostics had a common saying, sin all you want in the body as long as you don't corrupt your soul, which is, of course, completely ludicrous. But that's what modern Christians believe. They believe a form of Greek Gnosticism, but they don't even know, most of them, what Greek Gnosticism is. So these pastors have been force-fed all their lives this idea that politics, governance, civic responsibility is secular. And so they separate their lives into two compartments, secular and sacred, or secular and spiritual. And they think that they're profaning scripture, that they're lessening their calling by talking about anything that even resembles politics. But we all know that politics is really nothing more than the art and the science of governance. And the Bible is replete with teachings on proper
Amen.
governance. In fact, I even tell people, Bill, and I'm probably you probably have told them this as well. I challenge anyone to find one Old Testament hero that was not involved in governance in some way or in some fashion. You can't find any Old Testament hero or leader that wasn't involved in what we would call civic engagement in governance. You
Amen.
just can't. Yeah. Well, so God wanted his people involved. So that's roadblock number one, the lie of separation of church and state, because all of that's a lie. It's just a total lie. But pastors have been taught it for so long, they believe it. The second roadblock is the fear of the IRS taking away their tax exempt status. These guys are terrified that the government is going to come shut them down. Now, here's the little secret that most people don't know. In the entire history of the IRS, not 100, not 1,000, not 50, not one church has ever lost its tax exempt status because of political speech.
Wow,
Not
that's encouraging.
one.
That's
Yeah,
huge.
not one. In fact, in presidential elections,
That's right.
the black churches take up offerings. For instance, when Barack Obama was running for office, they took up offerings in their church services and gave the offerings to Barack Obama's campaign fund. Well, did anybody get prosecuted? Did anyone go to jail? Did any church lose their tax exempt? No. No. See, it's a paper tiger. So way back in 2008, Alliance Defending Freedom, used to be called the Alliance Defense Fund, put together what was called the Pulpit Freedom Initiative. Bill, you've talked about it a lot. I was honored to be one of the original 33 pastors across America. We got up in our pulpits after ADF gave us some training. We got up in our pulpits. We defied the Johnson Amendment, which is unconstitutional to begin with. And by the way, the IRS just recently admitted that.
Right.
And we endorsed candidates, from our pulpits. Then we sent copies of our sermons to the IRS that Monday and said, this is what I did in my pulpit yesterday. In essence, come get me. Because ADF wanted to get this into the courtroom and prove once and for all that the Johnson Amendment's unconstitutional and that the IRS does not have any control over what pastors preach. Well, we did it, and we sent all those sermons, and IRS didn't do anything, and then we did it again the next general election, and again and again and again. And 33 original pastors grew into the last official Pulpit Freedom Sunday that ADF sponsored. Over 1,600 pastors officially defied the Johnson Amendment in their pulpits, and the IRS did nothing. And then about 2 months ago, the IRS issues a statement to the effect of pastors can preach anything they want in their pulpits, including personally endorsing candidates. Now, we already knew that. Matt Staver with Liberty Counsel has taught for years pastors can even lend their names and pictures on campaign materials of people running for office that they want to support. Now, we're not suggesting that the church become a headquarters for a candidate or that churches take up offerings, but nobody's doing that except some of the black churches. But what I am saying is this has always been a paper tiger. Now the IRS has admitted it, so that one ought to be taken out of the way. Unfortunately, the average pastor, as odd as it might sound, is one of the least educated. Now, I'm talking about a technical academic education, but the least educated when it comes to the culture and the news of practically anybody around. And Bill, just a few weeks ago in a conference call that you and I were on, you made the point about pastors being in the center. Restate what you said about how the pastors during the Revolution period were kind of the center and the hub of news and all that.
Yes,
What
they
did you
were.
say?
They were the in their communities, which would include the church community. They were leaders in their communities. They were possessors of incredible knowledge of current events. They understood the political climate that they were in, and they taught their people. As
Yeah.
they taught their people the principles of godly government, and as historians have said, there had already been a revolution. The revolution was an accomplished fact before the war started, because the people have been so well educated in the principles of government and liberty that the knowledge of proper government was ubiquitous among the American people that were here at that
Yeah.
time.
No,
So,
that's exactly right. Well, the pastor in those days was the most informed. And if people wanted the
yes,
news, of course, they couldn't turn on Fox or whatever. They'd go to their preacher, and their
they didn't have
preacher
their
would
iPhones
disseminate.
or
Yeah. And preachers preached on everything. They would take a biblical prism and shine the light on
yes,
every subject. I've looked at sermons where preachers were preaching about the biblical basis for railroads. Can you imagine that? And of course, they would ultimately talk about innovation and invention and how ultimately those are gifts from the Lord, and how
yes,
the industrial revolution was a God thing and made people's lives better. All these good and perfect gifts, James says, are from above. So these guys preached on everything. They would preach sermons on meteorite storms and use those to point people to the creator of the heavens. These guys were plugged in, as we say
yes,
today.
they were.
So yeah, so the idea of being afraid of losing the tax exempt status, and one more thing about this second barrier, the tax exempt status of the church is not a gift from benevolent government. First of all,
Amen.
government's not all that benevolent. It
Right,
has been a constitutional fact from the very beginning of our republic. The framers saw the church as a sovereign entity, and they did not believe that one sovereign entity could tax another sovereign entity. So, for instance, the federal government doesn't tax my state of Oklahoma. They don't have the authority to tax Oklahoma, or Bill, they don't tax Virginia, because a state is a sovereign entity. Well, the framers saw the church as a sovereign entity. Then, secondly, if you read the writings of the framers, they believed that the only kind of people that can govern themselves is a moral people. And they
right.
believed the only way that America could be moral is if the gospel was prolifically proclaimed through the pulpits. And so that's why guys like John Adams said that our Constitution was written wholly for a moral and religious, and when they said religious, they meant Christian people, is
Right.
wholly inadequate to the government of any other. So this has been proven and proven. One more thing about the tax exempt status. It has been tested in court over and over and over, and every time the courts have said the church in America is tax exempt, it's tax immune, it's a sovereign entity, the government has no right. And that's what Jefferson was telling the Danbury, Connecticut Baptists, when they were afraid that he was going to declare some denomination as the national denomination. He said there's a wall of separation. But what he meant was there's a wall protecting the church from the government. Today, we flipped it backwards, and the wall is understood to be a wall protecting the government from the church. That is the opposite of what the framers understood. But the problem is, if people are not well read, if they're not properly instructed in schools, and we
Right.
know they aren't, generally speaking, they don't know any of this stuff. So the first two barricades, the lie of separation of church and state. Number two, the idea that the church is going to lose their nonprofit status if they speak about anything political. I've had candidates come and speak in my church, and I've told them, bring your campaign materials and put them out in the entry or the commons of the church. And as people arrive or leave, if they want them, they can take them. I believe that's what we ought to. If there's somebody that is the right person for the job, why wouldn't it be the uh, the desire of Christians to have Christians to represent them in government rather than godless heathens?
So
I
this
mean,
is
come
what I've
on.
always, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion because I know many of our audience, they're patriots. They're people that want to maintain our freedoms on all levels in our country. They're individuals that truly love one another. And so we're now stuck in this catch-22. When did it start that this huge movement that there has to be a separation of church and state, that it really became so, we talk to some teachers on either side or individuals on either side, they're always saying, well, we can't, because I'm always encouraging people to run for local office,
Yeah.
run for your school board, run for, whatever office that you possibly can hold so you can hold your voice. And I'm met many times with, hey, but there's a separation of church and state in our country.
Yeah.
So we have come so far away from the truth. How do we bring it back?
Yeah. Well, I think
Let me add this to that question, to what you're saying, Lisa. It's a great question, and I'm sitting here thinking, that in many ways, the damage of the Johnson Amendment has been done. It's been done. It's become pervasive within the church culture, very pervasive. How do we back out of this? How do we get out of
Right.
this mess? How do we get the church to begin doing its responsibility in relation to civil government?
Well, I think first of all, the Johnson Amendment was in 1954. And
Right,
when you do the research about the Johnson Amendment, of course, that's Lyndon B. Johnson. He was senator from Texas, running for
right,
his second term. He barely won his first term. In fact, most people believe he didn't. He stole it. He only won like by 87 votes in Texas. And so his challenger the next time around was making a solid case of how corrupt Johnson was, and it looked like Johnson was not going to be reelected. So as a senator, he pulled rank, and he passed what today has been called the Johnson Amendment. It's really not a statute. It's a part of the tax code. So it is statutory, but it's in the tax part of the law. And
right.
basically what it said is nonprofits and 501c3s can't speak in favor of or in opposition to candidates. Well, the reason he did that is H.L. Hunt, who was a conservative down in Texas, wealthy oil man, had created two PACs to shine the light on Lyndon B. Johnson and show what a corrupt communist he really was. And so Johnson was trying to shut up H.L. Hunt, is what he was trying to do. But you have to remember back in 1954, hardly any churches were 501c3s. The churches were just churches. And they were automatically, and by the way, still are by government, recognized as tax exempt, whether they're 501c3s or not. Johnson likely was not after churches. He was after H.L. Hunt. Unfortunately,
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Right there.
yeah.
That's
So
interesting comment.
unfortunately, in the late 60s and the early 70s, this movement began around America where lawyers were telling people, churches, you're going to be sued if somebody falls and breaks a hip, if they're ambulance chasers or whatever, and they fall and they injure themselves, they can sue every individual member of your church. Now, I'm not sure that ever happened, but they were encouraging churches, but if you will incorporate, then all they could do is sue the corporation. Well, pastors who didn't realize the mistake they were making started incorporating as a 501c3. But remember, the C means corporation. Now the church falls under corporate law because it's a corporation. Now it's nonprofit, but it's still a corporation. So my church today that I pastor is not 501c3. It's nothing. It's a church. And churches in America are automatically even seen by the IRS as tax exempt. So that's how this whole 501c3 and the Johnson Amendment got started. But as churches started becoming 501c3s, then they were swept into the Johnson Amendment, which I believe was unconstitutional to begin with. But
Yeah.
but that's how churches got swept into this, because now you talk to most pastors, there's hardly a pastor whose church is not a 501c3. They think it's a requirement. It isn't. It is
It's not.
not a requirement.
Wow.
No, and I would encourage any pastor, if you're starting a church, or even if you have a church, don't become a 501c3. And if you are one, don't be it. Get rid of your 501c3
Amen, Dan. Amen.
status. You don't need it. So that's a little bit, but I think that the problem's deeper than that. I believe after the war between the states, so we're talking 1865 and on, America really began to drift to the left. The secularization of America really started to take root, and guys like Charles Darwin, 1859, he releases The Origin of Species. People today call it the theory of evolution. Actually, it's not a theory. It doesn't even have enough evidence to qualify as a theory. Theories have to have some testable, provable information. It's a hypothesis. That's all that the theory of evolution is. It's not even a theory, it's a hypothesis. But America bought it hook, line, and sinker. And as we began to drift left, if you think you're an animal, you're going to act like one, and you do away with God. And so there's only two important questions in life. Did God make man, and thus he's sovereign, or did man make God and man is sovereign? There's only one of two questions and one of two answers. So as America became secular, we invented God rather than God creating us. And so with the secularization of America, the church began to drift. It stopped preaching the whole counsel of God. The preacher began to believe that his job was to fill the auditorium. Actually, his job is to fill the pulpit. It's Jesus' job to fill the auditorium. Jesus said in Matthew 18, I'll build my church. It's not the pastor's church. The pastor's not called to build the church. Jesus says, my church, I'll build it. You don't fill the auditorium, you fill the pulpit. Guys, stop doing that. And so today, the average pastor actually thinks that he's the CEO of a religious corporation, and he acts like one. So today with the mega churches, they're just big businesses. Now, I'm not saying that all of them are frauds. I'm just simply saying the shift has happened, but I believe it began with the secularization, probably swept in with the Industrial Revolution, man smarter than God, all this kind of stuff. And so now, Bill, you're right. We're in a fix. So back to the real question. How do we get out of this? I believe the only way is there two prongs to it. One, God's got to do something in the hearts of men. Pastors have got to stop being hirelings. Remember, Jesus said the hireling is the one that takes care of the sheep for a paycheck. Yeah. But if the wolf comes along, he abandons the sheep and runs off to save his hide. Right. But the true shepherd will fight for the sheep, and if need be, lay his life down for the sheep. And I would submit that the average pastor today is a hireling. He's more concerned about career and the size of his church and the size of his paycheck than he is his calling. I'm not even sure a lot of them are called. I'm not saying they're not Christians. I'm just not sure they're all called. But so one, God's got to do a work in men's lives. Secondly, we've got to be educated, Bill, which is, of course, a big deal that you and I are doing. We've got to educate pastors on just a few things that we've been talking about here. Yes. And, you know, Hosea says, God speaking, my people are destroyed because of their lack of knowledge. Now, directly, he meant knowledge of his word, but beyond that, just knowledge in general. So let me give the third blockade, the third barrier. First barrier, live separation of church and state. Second barrier, I'm going to lose my tax-free status if I speak out politically. The third barrier is a gross misunderstanding of Romans 13. Now, there are other similar passages of Scripture, but Romans 13 is the passage of choice, and that's where Paul teaches that our job is to submit to proper authority. The key, though, is proper authority. And he even defines what proper government is. He says proper government comes from God, therefore it's a minister of God, and it seeks to punish the bad guys and reward and protect the good guys. So the three characteristics of proper government is that it wants to do the will of God, thus it's a minister of God. Now let's stop for a minute. Can anybody envision Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or Jasmine Crockett being a minister of God or AOC. I'm
Um,
good. Hillary Clinton is a minister of God. I mean,
wow.
it's utterly ridiculous
Wow.
because their job is not to honor God. Their job is something, and who knows what their
Who
motives are.
knows what?
But
Yeah.
then the other two characteristics got to punish the bad guys and reward and protect the good guys. So, what do you do if your government is protecting the bad guys and punishing the good guys?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you read the writings of the framing preachers, the preachers of the revolution, they said that if a government does that, it has forfeited its right to govern and should be replaced, which is
Amen.
exactly what Jefferson puts in the Declaration of
Yeah.
Independence.
Yeah.
If any government ceases to protect the unalienable rights of the people, it's not only the job or the duty of the people. I
Yes.
mean, not the just the right of the people. It's the duty of the people to throw that government off and to replace it with a government that will do its job. So I believe that Romans 13, properly understood, says that you honor godly leadership, but you stand against tyrants. Now, you do it in a biblical kind of godly way, but we live in a republic. So what you do is you stand up and you speak out against them, and you run people for office against them, and you vote them out of office and kick their tails to the curb.
Mm-hmm.
And see, that needs to be preached from the pulpits. I just finished a 5 week
Mm-hmm.
series in my church. We started on Independence weekend, so it'd been July the 6th this year, and it's entitled "What the Declaration Declares." And
Mm-hmm.
I talked about all of the biblical principles that are in the Declaration of Independence. Phrases like nature, the laws of nature, and nature's God. Where did that
Mm-hmm.
come from? And what did those guys mean? See, people today believe it means law of the jungle, and
Mm-hmm.
God would be like evolution. So, whatever you want to do, whatever you think. No, no, John Locke and William Blackstone, who were the
Mm-hmm.
leading legal philosophers of that day, and that's who they're quoting from. John Locke said that the laws of
Right.
nature are the laws of God found in the Bible, and nature's God is the God of the Bible. He
So
said it.
here's another tough question. We look at how our children, what they're being taught, right? So
Yeah.
right now we have children from 4 or 5 and up that do not know what to speak of.
No,
So we have
exactly.
generations of children right now,
Their
and
parents don't know it.
correct. I don't know if any of you
Right.
remember. Well, I'm sure you do, but when the one of the producers from Fox would go walk around, outside the Fox studios and ask different questions about our government, and
Yeah.
9 out of 10 of them could not answer a simple
No.
question.
No.
So think
No.
about how much farther we are now with the confusion. Our kids are so distracted,
Yep.
and so it's programs like this that if we can get to the parents, right, and encourage the parents and get them back into a believing church
Oh,
and
I totally agree. Oh, I
support.
totally agree. In fact,
Yeah.
I've been telling parents for 20 years now, get your kids out of the government schools and
Hmm.
get them into a Christian school, certainly at least a private school. And a lot of parents say, well, I can't afford that. Okay, then homeschool. You say, well, I don't know. Well, there are homeschool co-ops now. It is
Yeah.
so
It's
easy to
growing. It's
homeschool. Oh,
growing.
it's like it's
Yes.
proliferating at an
Yeah.
exponential rate. And COVID actually helped that to happen,
Yeah, it
which
did.
is a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
For the first time, the parents were looking online to see what their kids were being taught during COVID because the kids weren't in classroom. They were learning online. And the parents were appalled, as they should have
That's
been.
something.
And so Christian schools, homeschoolers, it's taken off like a rocket. It's easy to do these days.
Yeah.
Churches can host homeschool co-ops. I mean, so we got to teach people separate the church and state is a lie. You're not
Hmm.
going to lose your nonprofit status. And Romans 13 does not say it's a sin to stand up against tyrants. And
Hmm.
I've written a whole book on that Romans 13 thing. It's a little over 100 pages. And if you look through history, look at the Hebrew midwives. They defied the decree of Pharaoh, and God applauds
Hmm.
them. Moses' parents defied. Daniel defies. I mean, you just go through scripture, And there's example. Look at Corrie ten Boom. She and her family helped to save Jews during the Nazi
Yes,
Holocaust. They were
yeah,
Christians, so it was
amazing.
a sin for them to disobey the laws of Germany.
Amazing.
How about Oscar Schindler? People have
Oh,
seen
yeah,
Schindler's List. He's breaking the law. How
yeah,
about Martin Luther King Jr.? He's violating the laws. Now we called them Jim Crow laws, but they were laws nonetheless. They
yeah,
were wrong. What about the
yeah,
Dred Scott decision that a black man's not a person, he's property? I mean,
yeah.
come on.
Come on.
Government is wrong a lot, and it's the job
Mhm.
of
Yes.
Christians to not only say so, but to stand up against it. We got to
We have
teach
the
people
laziest. We have the laziest
It,
few last
if,
generations.
but it's the
if there's
pastors. It's the
if
pastors.
there's,
Mhm.
if there's
Yeah,
pastors
I
listening to
agree.
this podcast today, one thing I would say is do a series on the laws of nature and nature's God. Find out what that means. Buy
Yes,
a copy of Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England and learn what the laws of nature are and begin to teach the laws of nature and nature's God.
that's
And
exactly right.
it would revolutionize your congregation.
That's right.
It would
In fact,
revolutionize the
Bill,
lives of the
Bill,
congregation.
could I do a shameless plug? They can go to
Sure.
my church website. It's L as in Larry, B as in boy, C as in car, OK as in Oklahoma. So lbcok.com. And they can pull up that 5-week message series. And I give them full permission if they want to use all of it. They can use the slides, they can use the points, make them their own, probably take it and do a lot better than I did with it. But I've done not all, but a lot of the research for them for a 5-week series on these very issues. And it's not like I'm the only one. I mean, Bill, you've taught on it. It's not like I've got the monopoly. And by the way, if they would like to go and get my book on the Black Robe Regiment or that book on Romans 13, they can just go to Dan Fisher, BRR, B as in boy, R as in regiment, R as in regiment. So Black Robe Regiment, Dan Fisher, BRR.com. And they can order both books, the DVD on the Black Robe Regiment, filmed on location with me in period costume. So, it's ways we can educate people
Amen.
and come out of this,
If they
so.
want to join
Before we
America's
go any
Black Robe
further,
Regiment, if they want to
Oh,
join
yes.
the organization we're founding and that we're trying to grow and become a leader in their political jurisdiction, I'd love to send them a complimentary copy of that. If they want to join America's Black Robe Regiment and the effort
Oh,
that we're
wow.
pursuing, I'd love to have them do that. And I'll give them a copy of your book,
Oh, that's
Dan.
kind
And
of you, Bill. Oh, thank you, buddy. Well, the book is over 300 pages. This is over 600 footnotes. It's not filled with anecdotes. I went through and researched this for 2 years. There,
wow.
Bill, you
excellent
well
stuff,
know
right?
this. There are sermon excerpts. There's excerpts from these preachers who were out on the field leading militias, writing back
Mhm.
home to their families, histories of some of these guys. Their stories are phenomenal. Maybe the
Amazing.
Yes, they
writing is
are.
not all that phenomenal on my part, but the story is phenomenal. And I would challenge any pastor to read that book with an open mind, close
Mhm.
it, and just walk away and say, "Well, I'm not going to do anything." I don't believe they can do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, before I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Cardio Miracle and Mr. John Hewlett. Each time we have these beautiful podcasts and we talk to speakers and pastors and individuals such as yourself that are making such a massive difference here in America, don't think you're not. John Hewlett is one of those gentlemen. I've always said that we can't fight with an empty wallet, a sick body, and
That's
if we don't
right.
walk with the Father. So he took his entire education, took a stand against the freedoms against our health, and developed a product called Cardio Miracle. I know, Bill, you've had great success with it, myself as well. Millions upon millions of people across the United States, actually, globally, are having great success with it. And I often think about the plan of the enemy, how he wanted to shut us down. He wanted to hurt our hearts. He wanted to shut our hearts down. And how John Hewlett really stood up and said, I have something that can help you. And because life is in the blood, this is a nitric oxide product that will help
Mhm.
to increase your blood flow throughout your body and also feed your cells in your body. So, again, that product alone has helped millions of people regain their health and regain their purpose and their passion in life and give them strength every single day. So we appreciate Cardi Miracle. We thank them for sponsoring this podcast each and every week.
Amen.
We know that, through this word and through education, we're going to be able to help people stay stronger, both physically, financially, spiritually, and mentally. Mental health right now in our country is an all-time high. We know that we have people walking around that absolutely have no idea what we speak of, can't even articulate and take the information in. So that's another plan of the enemy. And of course, with nutrition, that can change because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So I'm excited about that. At the same time, excited that we're putting this whole conversation to rest about, the separation of church and state. I've heard that for so many years, and I know that people are speaking about it, just like you did. But there needs to be more education about it. We need to take our freedoms at all levels in our country, at all levels.
Yeah. No, I agree. And, Bill has spoken on this a lot, has written on it. If they get into the book, again, I'm not trying to necessarily sell books, but it's there. Those guys lay out in their sermons, and I've got excerpts from their sermons from the 1750s and 60s and 70s. They lay out in their sermons in solid proof that thwarts these lies of separation of church and state. These lies of Romans 13 teaches that it's a sin for Christians to stand up against tyrants, and that our job is just to knuckle under and pray that God brings a better day. None of that is biblical. Now, granted, Paul couldn't stop the Roman Empire, but that's because it was no longer a republic. It was a dictatorship, and it's very difficult to overthrow a dictatorship. Like Christians in communist China, they can't vote, and if there is a vote, it's fixed. There's nothing real. But in America, we don't have that. We have maybe we could argue whether or not it's still a republic, but we still have a functioning republic. And if Christians will step up, but I'm telling you guys, and Bill, I don't have to convince you. You've been yelling this from the housetop for years. If the pastors don't lead, the churches will not do it. They just won't. That's why I travel around and do the presentation that Bill spoke of, where in period costume, it's kind of a one-man Broadway style production. I put on period clothing and I act, and I become some of these preachers, and I tell their story using multimedia, all kinds of sound effects. And, I'd love to travel to some of these churches if the pastors would be interested in having me and do that presentation. I've literally done it all over the country. Thousands of people have seen that presentation. I even travel with a traveling museum. I have flintlocks that we know the soldiers' names who carried them. Flintlocks.
Oh, my goodness.
I've got one that crossed the Delaware River with George Washington and was used by a private named
Bill,
Isaac
that's
Cook.
amazing.
Yeah, I've got, flintlocks that were used at the Battle of Bunker Hill, one that was used at the Battle of Saratoga. I've got all of these things that they don't get to just look at. With some assistance, I let them hold them. I have a pistol that was owned by Paul Revere. And they get to hold these things after the presentation. So they walk away, like I said a while ago, if they're not inspired or they're not moved, they're just, I think they're dead. I mean, if their fire is not, if their wood's not on fire by then, their wood is soaked wet. It can't burn. So, I'd love for pastors to reach out to me and bring that to their community. Bill's been with me at different conferences, and he's spoken, and I've spoken, and we're hoping to do more of that together.
Yes, indeed.
And bring the story to life. And here's the deal. Beautiful. I want everybody to know, it's not like I'm a hero, but I've done all these things. While I was pastoring a church of 1,000 people, I was also a member of the legislature in Oklahoma. Incredible. So I don't just talk about it. I've done it. Now, I'm no hero, and I don't have all the answers, but my point is pastors can do this. You can pastor a church, you can do these things, connect the dots, and God can use it.
I love it. Any parting words, Bill? I know that we got to wrap up.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to what Dan's been talking about. I think if somebody had walked into the House, into the Congress after America was after we won the revolution, started talking about separation of church and state, I think the representatives would have fainted because the idea was so far and would have been so contrary to the thinking of the people, because the people knew that pastors not only led troops, but they fought in the American Revolution. They went to war. They fought for their country. They
Yes.
fought for liberty. And we had two congressmen we had two men in the first Congress who were clergymen. One became the Speaker of the House. One was a general in the American Revolution. And and I think, in fact, I think if somebody come in and seriously recommended separation of church and state as it's been misconstrued today, it would have started another revolution. I think we would have had another war.
I agree. I agree.
So
incredible.
I'll finish up with this. I just want to say, if you can support what we're doing in America's Black Robe Regiment, I'm sure you can go to Dan's website. What is that, Dan? What's the best website for them?
DanFisherBRR.com.
DanFisherBRR.
Or they can go to my church website, LBC. Yeah. Or they can go to my church website, lbcok.com. Either one of those, they can get a lot of information. Or contact me. Reach out to me through those websites. I'll be happy to talk to the folks.
All right. And so for America's Black Robe Regiment, we need a financial support, and you can support us financially. The easiest way right now, I could say it on this podcast today, is just text the word black, BLACK, to 53445. You can put in any amount. You can do something as little, just donate. You can donate $5 a month, or you can donate $100 a month. We need more donors. And that's how you can contribute to what we're doing. An effort to grow
the other opportunity that we're correct, and the other opportunity is going to be scrolling on the bottom, as you see, is you can purchase the Cardi Miracle product using Bill's code, and that will go to his to support the Black Robe Regiment. And we're so pleased and honored to have you with us, Pastor Dan. And I know
thank you.
Opportunities that are going to come up, the more and more that we know the goodness in America, the wonderful, pillars that we still have that are standing for us, and we encourage others through our stories. So again, thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you, guys. Good to be with you.